Here we go, another episode in the Volgatti build, Volga plus Bugatti. In the previous episode, we put everything we had onto the car, fitted the chrome, made the retractable gear mechanism, and ended up with this result. After that, we took it all apart again and sent the chrome to be redone. The next step is to assemble the missing pieces of the puzzle. The first of these is the glass.
The question about the glass remains unresolved. For some reason, the glass from the BMW 6 doesn't fit our rear cocoon here. Strange, why is that? And here, there's a large amount of glass sticking out. We'll carefully trace the contour that we need and then send it to the workshop where they'll make glass to our required size. And as for the windshield, we'll try to cut it ourselves. It's not that expensive, $100. Well, at least we'll try it once, since we have one piece of glass. But the side windows are tempered glass, and as far as I understand, they'll crack immediately. Here, it's necessary to leave this gap. Let me remind you, the pillar here is still the original one. Here, these 1.5 to 2 centimeters are the gap for the rubber seal, where the glass will fit. By keeping this gap, we'll draw the contour we need. We've drawn it, and this is how we need it to be. Now it's time for our windshield. And as you remember, we kept the factory pillars and the original angle of the glass. Only the height has changed, become shorter. And now the next task is to either try cutting the windshield ourselves or order a new piece of glass to be made. For the previous model of our Volgatti, when it was based on the Ford Probe, we ordered this glass and it was made for us here in Belarus. It wasn't cheap, it cost us $500, but the quality was terrible. The curvature is good, but these side curves are really wavelets. Just say this glass turned out to be useless for us, so we want to use it to practice cutting. After reading up online, we found that some people have had positive experiences cutting windshields. There are two options for cutting it, either with a diamond blade or a tile cutter. First, we'll try cutting the glass with an angle grinder. I wanted to share a few thoughts about cutting with diamond blades. We bought some inexpensive blades, and maybe with more expensive ones, this problem wouldn't occur. When we turn on the angle grinder and start cutting, we notice that the blade has some wobble. The angle grinder jumps around on the glass like this, which means it's knocking along the cutting line, and that's what causes cracks to spread. We realized you can cut glass with a diamond blade, but there will be chips. The chips are easy to sand down with an attachment like this. People call it a turtle for tile polishing. But the most damaging thing for glass is the wobbling of these discs. Maybe the expensive ones don't have this issue. So I decided to get rid of the wobble, to grind down the disc a bit so it would work more smoothly. For that, I just took a piece of metal pipe and started running it along the disc. There you go. After making several careful cuts through the metal pipe, the disc got ground down a bit, the wobble was smoothed out somewhat, and it doesn't jump around as much anymore. Off camera, I took a thinner disc, which I used to make a lot of cuts through the metal pipe, and on that one, the wobble was reduced to a minimum. Of course, after these manipulations, the disc gets dull and its working surface becomes a bit smaller. But at least the severe wobbling finally stops. For now, it's probably best to cut from both sides up to the film that separates the two panes of glass. So you cut from one side up to the film, then flip it over and cut from the other side up to the film. That's probably the right way to do it. As we can see, in principle, this is a perfectly viable method for cutting laminated glass. The edges turn out chipped, and we'll smooth out those chipped edges with this turtle pad using 30 grit abrasive. Well, here it is. Seems like success. We've only cut through 20 centimeters of this triplex and sanded the edges with a turtle pad. Yes, the edge is a bit chipped, but if there's a rubber seal here, like on all windshields around the perimeter, then it's actually a decent option. But we've only cut through 20 centimeters. There you go. But our windshield is 1.40 meters on one side, and we need to make two cuts on one side, then flip it and cut from the other side. So that's 3 meters in total, with God's help, hopefully, so that the crack doesn't spread anywhere. Well, it's pretty intense work.
In theory, the second option is much simpler than the first. So we started with it before trying to cut 3 meters of glass with an angle grinder.
So, what's the theory? On both sides, you need to score the exact same spot with a glass cutter. Then usually, using some kerosene or by heating that area, the glass will crack right along that line. And then you cut through the film that holds the two pieces of glass together with a knife.
At first we just tried with a low flame.
Everything just burned through. Nothing cracked for us at all.
Then we added some kerosene, but that didn't work either. We turned the flame up to maximum, and still no luck.
The attempt to cut the glass with a glass cutter ended in failure. The cut seems straight, neat, and continuous. But when we try to break the glass by hitting it with a string, for some reason it doesn't crack where we want it to. It cracked here at the edges, here too at the edges, and here it just went off in a random direction. There's no guarantee at all. Or rather, there's absolutely no guarantee. So without experience, we just can't manage to cut the glass like this right away. We'll try again with the angle grinder, this time cutting it lengthwise, and see what happens. If that doesn't work, then we'll just give up on this idea and hand the glass over to the professionals.
Let's get back to the angle grinder.
Here's what we've got. Huge chips, almost a centimeter wide, look. And cracks are spreading. All the cracks are shooting off to the right, so to speak. I wonder why. Here's one running off to the left. I think there's no point in cutting this glass further, even from both sides. I washed my hands.
But while Andrei was washing his hands of it, we googled the special disc and decided to give it one last try. In fact, you can see this disc in action on the screen. We also found another type of disc. It's actually called a glass cutting disc. We tried it out, practiced on a Ford Windshield. That's it, yes. It's working out perfectly. The disc cuts much faster and cleaner, with less chipping. Of course, the cut isn't perfect, there are some chips and flakes, but we'll polish that later. And with this disc, we were already confident that we could cut the BMW windshield with 100% guarantee. And everything would work out for us. As they say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. That's what happened to us. Did we cause God to laugh?
My confidence turned out to be unfounded. This glass turned out to be, well, somehow more delicate. So I decided to measure the thickness. The difference between these glasses is 1.5 millimeters. This one is about 6.5 millimeters thick, almost 7, and this one is 5 millimeters thick. So this glass is thinner, and because of that, it's more fragile. And then the cracks started to appear. Here, for some reason, a crack appeared right away as soon as I started cutting. And at the end, well, the end was my own mistake. These 3 big cracks just shot off. That happened because this piece that was left after cutting, even though it was propped up with foam, I think that's probably what caused these big cracks to appear. So we ruined this piece of glass. I don't know what we'll do next, whether we'll order and cut more glass. We decided to try carefully cutting side-tempered glass as well. It's called Stalinite. Let's see what actually happens now after this.
And for the sake of experiment purity, or honestly, just for fun, we decided to see what would happen with tempered glass.
Summary. We practiced, cut, and gained experience on thick glass. This one here, which was custom made for us as a sample. It was 6.8 millimeters thick, almost 7. Having gained experience and inspired by the positive result, I decided that I would be able to cut this BMW glass with a 100% guarantee. But it turned out to be thinner. It's 5 millimeters thickened. Without practicing on a spare piece, I immediately started cutting along the line I had marked. And it ended up being a major failure. What should we do next? Should we keep on cutting, perhaps try buying some more glass, or just stop at this result? But at least we'll gain this experience.
In the end, I remembered that Maxim from the Machinatori channel had recently ordered custom-made glass for their new Buchanka. The result turned out great, and to avoid further experiments, I decided to ask them for help. Maxim gave me the contact information for a trusted workshop. That's where we sent our glass to have the measurements taken and new ones made.
In the end, this BMW glass of ours, even if we had managed to cut it evenly without cracks, wouldn't have worked for us for two reasons. First, the original glass has these cutouts here that match the shape of the pillar that goes in here. And let me remind you, the BMW hood set much higher. That's why there's such a wide black silkscreen strip here, but it covers more than we actually need. And we also need a similar black strip along the top. As a result, we're going to give this glass to the guys so they can use it as a template to make a new one for our same height, same curve, same width. But these edges here will have a different shape, and the silk screening around the perimeter will also be done to the exact dimensions we need.
So we sent the glass to St. Petersburg to have the measurements taken from it, while we ourselves moved on to the next piece of our construction puzzle. And here I propose to go back a little, about 2 years ago, in order to briefly tell the whole history of the creation of the wings. Initially, we took the original wings from the Volga. We cut out the wheel arch with extra material and welded in an EVA arch, as it fit perfectly in shape and size. Then we used about 10 kilograms of body filler and shaped it to the form we wanted. Or so we thought. A year later, we changed the donor car, so we had to lengthen the fenders. To do this, we cut off the rear part of the original BMW fender and joined it to the main fender using several more kilograms of body filler. You'd think that would be the end of it, but Andriukha's inner perfectionist had other ideas.
Let's get back to our edges. As you remember, I shaped them, filled them under tape, and did a test paint job. We painted it red, and some issues came up. So, if you look from here, the edge looks straight. I shaped it there under tape with a ruler. Everything was fine. From here, it looks pretty good. But if you look from the end, from the headlight, it kind of waves like this. Why did that happen? On this fender, we combined a lot of different parts. Somehow, all this must be carefully shaped into a unified form. So, about the edge, the arch here sticks out a lot compared to the fender. And if you look from this side, you can see the wave I was talking about. So here is the plane of the fender, here is the arch that sticks out, and here it starts to curve towards the headlight. As a result, if you look from the end, the edge waves like this, forming in shape, and somehow this needs to be fixed. Obviously, we can't fix anything here because this is where the curve towards the headlight goes. But this part right here, this bend, needs to be filled in with putty, meaning we need to add more in these spots to create a smoother transition. Because when the car is glossy, it will reflect light, and the reflections will exaggerate it. It will look like there's a dent here. In reality, there is no dent here at all. It's just that the shape here transitions from a flat surface into this arch, and this kind of bend doesn't look very nice. Remember, these fenders are still just prototypes. That is, it's a bunch of putty from which we'll make fiberglass molds, and then we'll have plastic forms without any putty. That's exactly what we're going to do now. We need to fill in this gap here, blend it in like this. So we mix up some putty and touch up these areas here and here, and then we finish off the opening, since this is the final finished opening that will be painted.
Yeah, all that's left is to throw on a couple more kilos of putty, spend a week shaping it, and that's it. But in reality, this is actually really important, because later on we'll be making a mold from these fenders. And if we don't perfect the shape now, then every part we make from that mold will be imperfect as well. And just to give you a sneak peek, the plan is to make more than just one pair of fenders, but Andrei doesn't know about that yet.
On the driver's side, I just used a spatula to shape the edge and filled it with putty, but on the left side, we're gonna try a different technique using this kind of straight edge. I covered it with masking tape so the putty wouldn't stick to it. You'll understand why later. Next, we secure the straight edge to the fender with masking tape and position it. The straight edge is set up, and now we pack putty underneath it, creating a sort of guide. It will become clear how this will look in a moment.
Everything here is clear and visually obvious, and in some ways it's like plastering walls. You put up a guide, then use it as a reference to add more putty, level the surfaces, apply guide powder, smooth out scratches from coarse sandpaper, and after 3 days you move to the next step. Then, using the same approach, we prepare the rest of the body panels, the rear fender and door opening.
Let it face, Judgment Day won't get mixed up.
After a few more days, the shapes are finished, and we apply polyester primer generously in several layers. But that's not all. The next day, once the primer had dried, we did the final shaping of the surfaces to achieve a perfect result and edges as straight as a string. That's exactly why we applied several layers. After that, everything was thoroughly degreased and the rear fender and door opening were primed. With those finished, we can move on to the front fenders. At this stage, it's a sculpture made up of many elements joined together with filler. Of course, this is in no way suitable as a body part, but that's exactly how it was intended. Now we're going to take a mold from this sculpture and make new high-quality fenders. That's why we're building an edge. We prepare the fender for molding using the well-known technique. Just like we did with our rear shell, we made a flange out of PVC plastic. The wing had to be divided into two parts. This protruding headlight element extends in such a way that if we were to mold it as a single shell, it would be impossible to remove the fender from the mold afterward. So we divided it into two parts here. Since we only need the mold for a single use, we simplified it, of course, so as not to spend too much time on it. So these parts here will be made later. In fact, you'll see how it goes during the process. That's it. Otherwise, the technology remains the same.
So then Andrei got started on the plan he'd come up with himself. First, the release agent. Then we mix the gel coat and apply it to the first half of the fender.
Got by without you.
Then we lay fiberglass mat over this half.
I strum the strings on my guitar, strain my voice for everyone to hear. Somewhere without you I fade away. Entrance.
The next day, the resin had dried, and we removed the temporary edge so we could get to the main edge formed by the fiberglass mat. As a result, we'll have a precise, rigid, detachable mold. To do this, repeat all the same steps on the other side. Separator, gel coat, fiberglass.
In my head, if I need this nerves turned inside out, I'll go on the balcony barefoot, sort through my thoughts.
We've laminated the mold. Let me remind you, our mold is thin, just for a single use. We're not planning to produce these wings for now, so we didn't bother too much with the mold. As for the layers, we have one layer of 150 gram fiberglass mat and 3 layers of 450 gram mat. Well, that makes for a pretty sturdy product. The thickness will be about 4 millimeters. That's more than enough for our purposes. We split it into two parts here because it will form a joint. I've already talked about this. Now, regarding the trimming location and the flanges, there's a lot of excess here with drill holes so that we can later bolt these two parts together and then we remove everything from the car. We did it on the car because of course it would have been easier to take the wing off and work on it at the table, but the wing would have become significantly warped due to its weight. It's actually very heavy. If you put it on a flat surface, it could easily get a bit twisted, so we decided to do it all by car. Of course, this caused us some inconvenience. We couldn't make this mounting part there, and here there's also a bend, but all of this was done to preserve the shape. Next, we stick to the plan: drilling, sawing, cutting.
Unboxing! Whenever you take apart a matrix, there's always this slightly tense moment, because you're never completely sure that everything went according to plan, that the separator worked well, and that our week of work won't end up in the trash. But let's hope for the best, trust our experience, and see how it turned out. Hopefully everything ended in success. There's one tense and anticipated moment for you, it's this bend in the arch. We were too lazy to make another flange and a matching part, so we just rolled it all up as a single piece. And here, the fender will be very difficult to remove because there's this little bend. But all of this was expected. I'll repeat, since the mold was only for a single use, we simplified things so as not to stretch the mold making process out for 2 weeks. In other words, we managed to get it done in just about a week. So that's why we have this little issue, but still everything will come off and we'll end up with a good part. The release agent worked perfectly for us. Here we applied 2 layers of alcohol-based release agent and then 2 more layers of wax on top. We combined this kind of approach and, well, this method works. Here a piece of filler was pulled off from the wing, just the thickness, but that's nothing, that's just the beginning. Hooray! The wings weren't damaged at all. Here it's already a centimeter.
So, the molds are ready, but before laying fiberglass mat into them, everything must be carefully cleaned for easier work, which is exactly what Andrei is doing now. 15 minutes later, the first fitting.
As you remember, we didn't make this counterpart in the wing mold, the part where the bolts will be screwed in. So now we're taking PVC plastic and using the same hot glue, attaching a flange like this, and we'll lay it up in this way to create the section through which the wing will be mounted. And one more thing, here too the counterpart pieces that the wing bolts onto are missing. But we have an old mold from a BMW wing with these parts. So now we'll make these missing pieces, put them here, and then start laying up the wing. Why didn't we lay them up right away? Because the wing is mounted on the car. It's an extremely inconvenient spot. Plus, there are already bolts screwed in there, which will also, well, get in the way of making the mold. So in this way, we kind of made this part easier for ourselves. And one more point about preparing the matrix. We'll seal some of the joint surfaces with modeling clay, and we'll scrape it down with a scraper so that everything here is nice and even, and later we won't have to rework or finish these areas on our part.
A bit of modeling clay, and then everything goes according to the method we've already learned. The same materials are used here as were used to make the molds, so we won't repeat ourselves. But in short, the idea is this. We lay fiberglass mat into the mold, which precisely replicates the shape of the wing, and as a result we'll get a new part out of I-tone without any filler, fully suitable for further use. By this point, we finally had the long-awaited new windows made and delivered over 1,000 kilometers from St. Petersburg to Grodno, thanks to Max Machinator and Edward from Petra Mobile Company. This is actually the craftsman that Maxim recommended.
At last the glass has arrived for us. There are no issues with the glass. We like everything about it. It looks just like factory glass, exactly as it should. There's this black silk screening around the perimeter. It has a nice sheen with smooth curves, and there are no waves or distortions. The color is pleasant too, with a slight greenish tint compared to the sample we had made before. This is on another level. Well, that glass was just plain transparent, and for some reason it looked kind of awkward on the car, to be honest. Plus, on that glass, you could clearly see where it had been bent. I mean, the curvature, some angles, you could almost feel it by hand. It just gave the impression of a very raw, unfinished product. With this glass, everything is just perfect. I'm honestly thrilled. In addition to the windshield, they also made us side windows, but those will be trial side windows because they're made of triplex, also 3-layered. But the side windows are supposed to be single layer made from tempered glass. So now we're also going to measure these side windows, check if the shape is correct, how they roll down, and how the rubber seals fit around them. And then we'll make them out of tempered glass. We'll install this glass in the door, see how the seals fit, and make sure everything is good with its shape and functionality. And then we'll send these windows out so that we can have tempered glass like this made for us. Now, about the wiper mechanism, obviously our hood is different and located in a different place. As you remember, the BMW had struts here with these tabs where the hood would attach. So on the BMW, the hood wasn't here, but here 5 centimeters higher. The hood, as a result, covered the original wiper mechanism and everything looked different. At first, we considered installing a single wiper here mechanism like on old Mercedes models, for example the 124. We looked into it, but that mechanism is rather bulky, and here the engine itself is already positioned quite close. So we decided, why not try to install the original BMW dual wiper mechanism here? But it's not that simple, because previously the mechanism was located where the hinge is now. We made these temporary adapter plates to move the mechanism a bit away from the hinge. As we can see, it doesn't fit in its old place anymore. It's shifted by about 5 centimeters, probably to make room here for the hood hinge mechanism to function. We attached the wiper mechanism, shifted it a bit, and it looks very harmonious here. Well, that's because it's the original part. It used to be here. Next come the leashes. And this is where the funny story begins. Our driver's leash is huge, and our passenger's leash is just as huge, even bigger. The design is large, bulky, and clearly not suitable for us. Because of its bulkiness, it really limits visibility here. On top of that, these wiper arms, without even counting the wiper blade, which would end up cleaning the roof arm itself, reaches all the way to the edge of the glass. Obviously, it should only reach the middle, so we need much smaller wiper blades. It's the same story with this mechanism. It works in a very interesting way here. Clearly, this setup doesn't work for us. If you imagine this hood, all this bulkiness really doesn't fit into our concept. So we need to come up with something and do it differently. That's where these wiper arms from old Volkswagen came to our rescue. These are tiny mechanisms from the rear window wiper of a station wagon. They're both very short, and both are identical. We lengthened the driver's side and changed this angle. We reworked this bend here, and in the same way, we modified the passenger's wiper arm. So it seems like a pretty good concept is taking shape. The mechanism is no longer as bulky. Yes, we work on this part here, on this joint. We might change something here, but the mechanism is already working and installed on the glass. Now let's turn it on and see how it wipes. And everything is working quite well for us. Yes, this wiper doesn't quite reach all the way here, but we'll try to adjust that. And that passenger oar has a very interesting trajectory of movement. With this kind of methodical approach, you just go a little bit into that corner. This is how it looks with the hood on. In general, everything looks neat and not out of place. The only thing we haven't decided on yet is what kind of wipers we'll install. The old classic frame ones or the new ones like this.
Oops. I think a lot of people are curious how much this mistake cost Andrei. So, as is now our good tradition, all the latest news, prices, figures, and behind-the-scenes details are posted in our Telegram channel. That's also where you'll find the continuation of the story about the windshield.
I molded the fender in the mold yesterday, and today it's time to take it apart. I made the fender the same thickness as the mold. Of course, that's not correct, because the mold should be much thicker, reinforced with some kind of frames or ribs. But in our case, I'll repeat, since it's a one-off casting, this is more than enough. Again, when the resin cures, it gives off heat, and as a result, the mold can sometimes warp. You really need to keep that in mind as well. Place the fender in a relaxed, natural position so it doesn't get warped or deformed when our resin sets. Well, in our particular case, I think there won't be any significant problems at all, so I think we should be fine. Let's start by carefully examining the matrix itself.
Finally, the long-awaited unpacking of the wing, the production of which took 2 years. Yes, that's the kind of work it is. But already today, we can say with confidence that all the main difficulties are behind us, and finishing the project is just a matter of a couple of months.
He writes, fed up with things at home, and as usual, there's never enough of anything. I sit here little by little trying to figure things out, but why does a tram need such big windows? I wonder, once again, I don't understand anything.
Let's take a moment to carefully sum up everything we've accomplished so far. So why exactly did we decide to make these custom wings and spend so much time, energy and effort working on them? When you take a close look at the fender that was installed, you can very clearly see what it's actually made of. In fact, it was originally from a 21st Volga automobile. Here we have a wheel arch from a Niva. And here we have a fiberglass rear section from a BMW. Well, sort of an original BMW fender. Well, it's kind of questionable, right? Especially considering that there's actually quite a lot of filler right here. And then the plastic fender is a single solid piece. They're strong and reliable. Yes, of course, 80% of the fiberglass sold on various marketplaces is total garbage because they make very thin, poor quality products and there are issues with installing them. But we made ours for ourselves, made a strong, reliable fender. All right, now let's weigh it. Our fender weighs 14.5 kilograms, but it's hard to call it a wing. It's more like some kind of complicated mishmash, a sort of mosaic made up of 3 foreign pieces, welded together in some places, riveted and glued in others. Yes, of course, it all looked very nice, clean, and presentable on the outside, but we know deep down what it's really made of underneath. That's exactly why we made the Mauer monolithic fiberglass fenders. I made them thick, so they'd be reliable. Sure, if this were some kind of super sport, we could have made it weigh just 1.5 kilograms, but that wasn't our goal. Our main objective was to make it reliable. They're strong, dependable, and resilient. There you go. Now let's weigh this plastic fender. Our fender weighs 6 kilograms. Well, that's good. We saved 10 kilograms and eliminated a huge amount of filler from our project.
And now, at long last, we finally come to the final step, the very first fitting.
The doors are ready. Now it's time for the mirrors. And it's clear the original BMW mirrors don't fit our design. But from these mirrors, we only need these little triangles onto which we'll mount classic chrome mirrors that will match the design of the Volga 21. That's why we're now taking apart the BV mirror. We detach the main body from the little triangle, which is what attaches to the door. Next, we'll probably cut off this bracket and make the triangle flat so that we can work with it and mount the mirrors we need onto it.
Our plan was to put these triangles in the stock spot and attach retro mirrors. To do this, Andrei is taking them apart, cutting off the excess, covering the holes with fiberglass but doing unnecessary work. After installing them, we decided to start over because we didn't like it. In the end, we decided to install a glass insert instead of this triangle, as planned. During installation, we decided these triangles will be transparent glass. Andrei is still preparing the old metal version, since plans were different. Besides, Andrei never misses sanding and using his new Toya body repair station. Mix primer unnecessary triangles ready.
We're screwing in the bracket at the old mirror spot. There will still be a mirror, just a different one now. We installed the glass. Let me remind you, this glass is 3-layered and not quite the right kind. If everything works well, we'll replace it with tempered glass. But we still have one big unresolved issue, the fact that this shell here covers a large part of the glass. And as we remember, in the original BMW, when you open the door, the glass would drop by about 2 centimeters and then the door would open freely. It would lower along the rubber seal, but that's not enough for us. We need the glass to drop this much 10 centimeters. How to solve this, we still don't know. Work rear quarter windows. For obvious reasons, the original ones no longer fit us. They need to be much smaller. We tried cutting the glass, so we made plastic molds from them instead. We applied release on top, made overlays. We'll work with these since the windows will end up really small. We also won't have a rear row of seats. So quarter windows aren't relevant, so there'll be solid black covers. Or maybe we'll make them out of carbon fiber, possibly forged carbon as an option, since we have a forged carbon trim piece at the back. And it might match well with that. For now, as an example, we'll cut these, paint them black, and cover our openings.
It's the same story here. During the installation process, we decided that these rear quarter window covers will be made from forged carbon, since it's already used in the project and should look harmonious overall. We must redo. What can you do? That's the job. But for now, we're just painting them black to show you some kind of result.
Now, about the mirrors, we have a few ideas. We've ordered these shiny chrome mirrors, and we still haven't decided. That's why we ordered a large number of them at once, so we can try them out on the spot, make a decision, choose something, and maybe return the ones we don't want if that's even possible, of course. So we're opening them carefully, hoping that we can return the ones we don't like, and we'll be trying them on. Option number 1 is a mirror with an interesting shape. There's an option to put it here, but then this triangle looks kind of awkward probably. Maybe if it were transparent, it wouldn't look so out of place. Probably we'll put it on top of it, that way it will look more harmonious, I guess. Well, it's questionable. I don't really like it. Option number 2, I assume this one doesn't suit us at all, because, well, although if you put this little thing on the leg, it probably unscrews, right? But basically, it's something kind of bicycle or moped-like, so it's probably not our option either. By the way, for some reason the mirror looks more interesting in this spot, in my opinion, but we'll put it here so the triangle doesn't look empty. Questionable. Option number 3, a kind of polished stainless steel with a little line. It also looks interesting. If these chrome ones have a kind of shine, a mirror-like gloss, then this one is more matte. This little mirror, I think, could actually work. Here, thanks to this footrest, it looks pretty good on this triangle. You can even set it at an angle. Well, if there are chrome trims on the window sills here, it might actually look pretty good. This option could be considered for installation. The fourth option is on an interesting kind of stem, also a chrome mirror. The reflection is really white, bright and beautiful, and it also looks quite fun. Let me remind you that we used to have chrome strips here, and this shape will actually go quite well with the chrome rectangles on the fenders. So I would probably vote for this option. These moments of choice are so agonizing when you actually have options.
The next piece of the puzzle is the side skirts. For the car to look neat and factory-like, everything needs adjusting. First, we slightly shorten the base of the side skirt. We cut it and immediately try on the fiberglass cover. What's the idea here? We want to fit the shape of the cover so that it closes off the edge of the body and ultimately looks like a single finished element. We'll weld the metal part back on, but a bit later. To do this, we glued on an end cap, mixed up a compound, added fiberglass mat, and after a couple of hours we have this shape, which just needs to be refined and primed. As a result, after the installation process is complete, it will look just like this. In fact, it actually took a total of 3 full days of careful, detailed work just to get the seals properly primed. Yes, just to fit almost finished parts, but in the end, this is the result we have.
We refined the lower part of the seals, changed their shape, and made mounting points for the plastic clips. Here we'll have the jacking points. The seals will be attached just like on a full-fledged car, following the original seals example, using plastic clips. So, how is everything? Neat, just like from the factory.
By the end of this episode, we've put a decent portion of the missing pieces together. There's just a little bit left to go. Thank you for watching and wishing you all the best.